Hello and welcome everybody. Monica, Empower Your Health, Empower Your Life TV. At Empower TV, we connect you to health and wellness resources so that you can empower yourself and create the life you want and the life you love. Let's go. So welcome, and I appreciate everybody who may be listening today live or listening to the recording. And we have a very special and very honorable guest today. And I am very much looking forward to hearing her story and her sharing. I have a feeling she's going to bring a very profound perspectives on important issues. And, and especially, say, if you're somebody who have been suffering from chronic pain or struggling with unresolved issues that were not helped by the medical care, by drugs, by surgeries. Maybe you have somebody in your family, a loved one, a friend, or somebody you know who you care deeply about, who's been suffering and maybe doesn't know where to go. I think that Maria can really shed, or our guest, I haven't even say her name yet, Maria Socolof, but we'll introduce her in a minute. But I think our guest will really shed some very important light onto your journey and hopefully guide you into a better place. So this is my hope. And so let's welcome Maria Socolof. And hello, Maria.
Hello, thank you.
And Maria Socolof was a competitive gymnast through college and had a successful career as an environmental health scientist. Then everything changed when at the age of 40, she ruptured her disc in the neck. Years of debilitating pain followed. And then through bewildering revelations, true healing finally began. She shares her story in her memoir, The Invisible Key: Unlocking the Mystery of My Chronic Pain. She shows that one can be healed even when hope is lost. Wow. I was very touched by this sentence that Maria shared with me. And Maria, I really appreciate you being here. Thank you so much for taking your time. And I also want to thank you for all you do out there in the world, sharing your story through your book, putting all the effort into writing, through your website, through the social media. You're doing really profound and amazing work, and I want to really honor that. And I'm very excited and very much looking forward to hearing your story and learning more about it. And I'm excited for our listeners to actually be able to find new answers and have that new light shed on their healing journeys. So welcome. How are you doing today?
Thank you so much. I'm wonderful. Thank you. I really appreciate your work as well, and having this platform too. So many of us can also share through your channels as well. So thank you. But yeah, I'm doing great, and I'm excited to get started.
Wonderful. Well, great. So I thought about starting with just asking you about your background and maybe tell us a little bit about, how did it all start and how did you come into this place where you are sharing about your healing journey, or, anything that you find is significant in coming up from the past up to now?
Sure. Like you said in the introduction, I was a gymnast through college. I started as a younger child, but I competed through my college career and had pretty much a great life, great childhood, great upbringing, two parents who adored all of us, the kids that they had, the three of us, and really no complaints. I used to laugh at times, say at some point I'm going to pay for this charmed life I had, which is ironic now, of course. But so yeah, everything was going swimmingly, and I graduated from college. I still loved to do gymnastics. It was my passion. And even after I graduated, there really wasn't an opportunity to compete in gymnastics at that ripe old age of 22. But I continued to work out and find gyms to teach gymnastics so I could work out. But in the meantime, I went to graduate school and started my career as an environmental scientist, got married, had to have two beautiful daughters, and life was going well. And then when I was 40 in 2005, I rolled over in my sleep and heard a pop in my neck. And it hurt initially, but not enough that the gymnast that I wasn't going to ignore it and keep going with my day. So I did. I got the kids to school. They were 4 and 10 at the time. And I went to work, but by noon, I couldn't even hold my head up anymore. Like the pain was just escalating very quickly. And so I went home that day, assuming it would go away, because usually pain does that after a day or so. And it just wasn't going away, and it was getting worse, and it was extremely intense. I really felt like I was in labor turns out, for 3 straight weeks. And the epidural didn't work when I had my kids. So it was that intense. And it was 3 weeks before I finally got an MRI, even just some of the debacles with dealing with the doctors. And I'm not necessarily blaming them. At the time, I didn't really know how to take care of myself and advocate for myself either. So I just waited patiently while I was in excruciating pain, crying on the couch, not being able to move. It was a long weekend, so I waited for the doctor's office to open on a Tuesday, whatever. So, but it took 3 weeks, and I finally got the MRI that showed that I had ruptured a disc in my neck. And by then, I was starting to lose function of my arm. There was numbness in my fingers, and it was, again, just excruciating pain, shooting, burning nerve pain that was going from my neck down my arm for those 3 weeks. Finally, when they saw the MRI, my general practitioner sent me to a specialist, a surgeon. I had no interest in surgery or anything. I don't even like to take aspirin, but I went to see somebody because I was dying. And so they said, I saw a surgeon and said, 2 of them actually in the same day. And they said that they could do the surgery in 2 days because it was that serious. I knew the pain was that serious. So I figured this must be what I have to do. Turns out we didn't get it scheduled for another week. But so a month after I ruptured the disc, which was September 1st, 2005, I had surgery. And so I had ruptured the disc at level C7 of my neck, cervical vertebrae, and then 5-6 was bulging. So they decided to do a disc replacement at those 2 levels, at 5-6 and 6-7.
Wow.
So I had the surgery, and it was sort of a whole miserable experience in and of itself, but that's a separate issue. And after the surgery, I started to regain the use of my arm, and I now have the use of my left arm, and the nerve pain subsided, but I still had this debilitating, burning, jabbing pain in my neck and upper back, and it just wasn't going away. And the doctors were saying, "Oh, give it another month, give it another month," and month after month, it wasn't going away. Finally, 9 months in, I get referred to another. In fact, my dad, who was a doctor, suggested I see a specialist in physical medicine and rehab, also physiatry, it's called. So I went to this doctor, and he diagnosed me with myofascial pain syndrome, or chronic myofascial pain. So I said, okay, well, who's heard of that? What is this? But at least I have something that's known, because for months and months I'm going on in this miserable pain and thinking, people telling me, you should be getting better by now. People who've had this are better by now. And I was in serious pain, and I didn't know why and how. So getting a diagnosis was nice. So I thought, now I will be healed because this doctor will take care of me because he knows what it is. And we started physical therapy, trigger point injections, and other medications, but nothing was really helping. The trigger point injections helped a little bit for a little while. Then I was having side effects from the steroid that's in them, and they stopped even being effective. So kind of fast forward, 2 years went by basically of miserable pain. I was, if you want to use the 1 through 10, 0 through 10 scale of pain, before the surgery, it was a 10. After the surgery, it was around an 8, probably staying there for a while. So I was happy to have a little drop in pain, but still, not the 9 months of 8 was, I didn't want to be alive because I was in so much pain. And but with the shots, they came down a little, but it still was hovering around the 7 mark for 2 years, essentially. And we tried more drugs and more traditional physical therapy and anything that he could think of, and nothing was helping. Light exercise too, I started to do, and that was helping a little. I felt like, blood was flowing a little, but I was still so debilitated that it was 10 minutes. I worked up to get 10 minutes of just sitting up. I couldn't even hold my head up, for more than 10 to 15 minutes for a long time,
Wow.
for months and years, really. So finally, a friend of mine who was on my gymnastics team in college had suffered for a couple of years at least of back pain, and she told me about this myofascial release therapy, and she knew somebody who was a therapist, so she referred me to her, and I talked to her, and then I learned about this John Barnes method, and I read his book, and it all started to make a lot of sense. Because even though I knew I had this myofascial pain syndrome, it wasn't getting better. Even with what the doctor was telling me. But I started reading about how the tension in our muscles just can be based on our subconscious bracing patterns. Like I just figured, wow, I was in so much pain for those 3 to 4 weeks before my surgery. My neck was so worried about having that pain that it was clamping down so hard. So it made sense to me that, okay, this is where all these knots are coming from, and this pain and these trigger points, which everybody probably could feel at some point when they're stressed or something, or sat up too long at the computer, they feel these knots. In myofascial pain, it's just so intense, and kind of that on steroids, where it can hurt, you don't have to touch it, you can just feel it. It can refer pain to other places. So for me, it was referring pain down my back, up my head, up my neck into my head, and felt like my head was going to either explode at times, or it was in a vice, and just like these horrible sensations. But so I read this book and thought, wow, this makes sense, that the therapist could put their hands on you and help you kind of release that tension. So I found somebody locally, Bill Tavalacci, saved my life. And he started working on me. And the very first session that I had, I hadn't been able to move. This was 2 years into the pain, and I hadn't been able to move my head more than this much, because I have a plate in my neck and screws, and I figured that was why. That first session, he put his fingers under the back of my neck, and he just said, say, I let go. And I'm thinking, okay, whatever. I'm very left brain in this area, and as a scientist, and, dad's a doctor. My mother's a psychologist, so I get both sides, but, the psychologist side never really affected me as far as I knew or thought. So I thought it was a little funny. He's saying, say, let go. But I kind of rolled my eyes and said, okay, what have I got to lose? So I'm thinking to myself, I let go. I felt this sensation of butter melting, like 2 sticks of butter just melt in my neck. And I've never had that sensation. And that dramatic, I haven't since had such a dramatic melting of tissue or something in my neck. So, and then he said, get up and check your range of motion. And boom, my head went down. And in 2 years, I couldn't do that. And I've maintained that range of motion since. So I thought, okay, something worked here. My pain didn't go away like that, but just having that movement and some reduced pain. I saw him for about 3 or 4 months. I don't know if it was a couple times a week at the beginning, or once a week, probably a couple. So my pain was coming down, and I was hopeful finally that, this is it. I finally did find this thing that's working. But I hit a plateau, and as much as I was feeling a little better, I was still in pretty serious, we're hovering around 6, 7 instead of 7, 8, kind of on a daily basis. It would fluctuate, but it was still pretty bad. So I ended up going to a 2-week intensive of the John Barnes method in Paoli, Pennsylvania, where they had them at the time. Excuse me. And that the theory is that, you go in 3 sessions a day for 5 days a week. I went for 2 weeks, and it kind of starts to break down those subconscious patterns that are so ingrained in you. So if it's, instead of going once or twice a week, my body didn't have time to kind of get back into those old patterns. That's at least what I read and what made sense to me. And so I went to the intensive, and that's really when everything changed. And as far as my healing really began at that point. And what happened was, again, very left brain, thinking they were going to just do this massage-like work, use their hands to help release, because I felt those releases before. But all of a sudden, I'm getting very emotional. I'm like crying. I'm like thinking, where is this coming from? But then as I'm getting emotional and these thoughts are coming to me, like how afraid I was of the surgery, for example, or how frustrated I was with the nurses who, were ignoring my call when I was in the hospital, dying, thinking I couldn't breathe. So there was all this stuff that it started to make sense that, yeah, I had these emotions that could be clamping down on my neck also. So as they're working on me and these thoughts and emotions are coming up, things are releasing, I'm getting more movement, and my pain is coming down. So, this was great. So by the second to last day, like kind of every day it was something different. It was thinking about the surgery and how scared I was of that, or thinking about the 2 years I'd lived in pain and all I had lost out with my kids. And, it was kind of every day something else came up. And the second to last day, I remembered about being stuck in an undertow when I was a child. And I always remembered this. And I remembered being turning in the wave and my hair being in front of my face and feeling like I couldn't breathe. So when I remembered that, and I literally was kind of hanging off the end of the table, in the myofascial work, as you know, they encourage you to move, just let your body move how it wants to move. And it's like it has to process whatever trauma or whatever you went through that it may not have fully processed at the time. For example, in a car accident, some people will kind of move through those motions. Well, I was, I guess, kind of moving through this wave motion because I ended up hanging sort of off the table and my hair is in front of me. And maybe that's what reminded me of that time. And I could feel the fear and the not being able to breathe. And that made me think, wow, maybe that's why I was so scared of the surgery. And when after my surgery, my throat was so swollen that it was hard. My breathing kept getting cut off when I was back in the recovery, in recovery and in the hospital room. And that's why I was so scared in the hospital. And so anyway, this all started to make sense. I was like, wow, okay, this is why for 2 years I've had this tension, and it's letting go. So it was great because I was getting a reduction in pain. And after that second to last day, that Thursday of my second week, I was like, wow, I must have gotten everything. I, kind of went through my whole life, even back to my 5-year-old being stuck in the wave. And then I'm thinking, what else could come up? I can't imagine. And at the same time, I was a little disappointed that my pain hadn't completely gone away, because I had read about people who went on to these intensives or just do the myofascial work anyway, and miraculously they've gotten better. And that was my hope for me. But I wasn't quite there yet, but I had one more day, so I was still hopeful. So the morning of the last day, it's an outpatient situation, so I was not staying at the clinic. So before I went in, I woke up that morning to a dream that I remembered. And when I woke up, I looked around, I lay there frozen, and I literally felt this strange sensation, like a tingling sensation outlining my body. And I just lay there. And I think that was happening as I was remembering the dream. And it felt like I was being outlined like a crime victim is the thought I had when that was happening. And when I came to the conclusion of what the dream was, it was me as an adult, but it was it triggered a memory of me as a child. And I was molested, probably at age 10. And that was literally the first time I remembered since, in 32 years. So it was pretty mind blowing. And I had to just lay there shocked at first. And then, okay, I got to get up and I got to get to the clinic and start processing this, is kind of what I was thinking. But also thinking, I can't believe this is my life. Like, this happened to me. How could I not know? And at some deep, deep level, I knew, like when I remembered, I had this almost like a broken record kind of going in my head saying, it's no big deal. It's no big deal. It's no big deal. I kept hearing that, like I'd been saying it all my life, but not consciously. So it was a very strange feeling of this subconscious stuff coming, or this unconscious stuff coming up. So that was pretty incredible. So I went into the sessions that day, and just, emotions were flying off the wall. And by the end of the day, I was virtually pain-free. I mean, it was the first time in 2 years that I had just like cried out and let out all this emotion and all this stuff that I'd been literally holding for decades in my body and not knowing it. And so at the end, I was literally doing handstands and back bends in the treatment room that last session. And it was the most joyful thing. It was the best, even if it was the ugliest handstand or back bend I'd ever done, it was the best ones I'd ever done. but then they gave me some paperwork to fill out at the end of the whole 2 weeks. And in fact, before they gave me that, the therapist said to me, when I was feeling so good, she said, "Remember this feeling." And I thought, well, I'm healed, right? I don't have to remember because I'm done. Like, this is it, right? But when I was filling out that paperwork, I started to feel a little bit of that pain start to kind of come back over my neck and my head. And I thought, no, 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 don't come back. But they also had told me that it does take your body time to process it, and it can come and go. And but what I learned and what I gained from that, most importantly, was having hope. At that point, I now knew I could heal. I knew I could get better. And even if it was going to take longer, even if I had more to do and a lot more to process, which I did, and I still do have more to process, it's still really an ongoing thing. But like I said, I had hope and a lot lower pain. It was probably in the 3 to 4 range by the time I got home, on a more steady level after the intensive. So that was 2007, end of 2007. And since then, a year and a half later, I got rear-ended my car, things spiked up. So life still goes on, life happens and things continue to happen. So you still have to manage and deal with it and work on it. And I did a lot of psychological work and other trauma work, EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing is a trauma kind of psychotherapy method, but it's using kind of physical aspects too. And somatic experiencing is another approach that I did with a psychologist, kind of becoming aware of what your body's sensations are and how your body's responding to emotions and to other things and everything around you. So I've done a lot of other work, and I've tried a lot of other things too, acupuncture, which I was always afraid of because thinking of needles, like I just tense up at that thought, and it didn't help me and didn't work for me. I know it does for other people. But so there, I think my experience has been that what worked for me, I want to share and like let everyone know, but there's a lot of other things out there that might work better for somebody else, so it's like kind of, you got to keep trying and keep looking and be true to your own sense of what's right for you. Because you do have an inner wisdom that does come through, even if you don't realize it, and to try to listen to that. But I guess that's pretty much the story. I could go on and on, so I can stop here if you want.
Yes, well, it's an incredible story. It's a really profound story, and the way you share it too, with a lot of awareness of all the entire process. I think maybe this is a scientist in you, really examining how did it all unfold. Yeah. So I really appreciate that, and a few highlights that I caught. First of all, I think that it's your very unique and profound story, but also it reflects so many journeys out there. I feel like a lot of people are going through trauma, and maybe, it can be psychological trauma or physical trauma, or, everything together accumulated. And then they turn to find solutions and they cannot. And then finally, maybe they find a diagnosis or an explanation, but still, explanation is just the 1% of it. And it does give us hope. Okay, there's something to do, but then what do you do with that, right?
Right.
How can I solve that puzzle? Right. And so I do appreciate your kind of outlining the entire journey of your unfolding that healing process with the myofascial release at that time. And my question for you, you so with such awareness and so much sort of insight, you're able to sort of put together the past trauma and the molestation and your chronic pain. How did you make sense out of all of that? Because really, as you say, what happened, you woke up one day with neck pain, and that was the beginning of it.
Right.
So as a patient, do you remember, how did you put it all together? And I'm asking because I think in our culture, we still are struggling with understanding how emotions and physical pain go together. It's not something that we can easily explain sometimes, or it may sound kind of woo, but these are real experiences. So if you have any reflections on that, I would really appreciate that.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, the reason I wrote a book, because I really felt like I had to take people on this journey, because it was a journey for me to come to that understanding. Like you said, that my analytical brain came at it without this knowledge of the mind-body connection, essentially, and never would have considered it till I did go through this. So for me, it was this 2 years of first kind of the first year of just trying what the doctors were saying and realizing that wasn't it. So I just had to keep looking because I was in pain. Like I knew I could not live like this. So there was no option except to keep trying. So I just kept reading, and even when I could barely read, I couldn't hold my head up, but at least I could hold the book up for a little while. I had pillows stacked up, trying to hold, because it even hurt just to hold a book up for a while. But when I got to the point where I just had nobody else was telling me, I had to learn for myself. So that's, I think, the scientist in me just was searching for that. But then other people helped too. My mom actually sent me a book by Dr. John Sarno, called The Mind-Body Prescription. And he talks about, and that's where I first learned about the mind-body connection, really. And he talks about how, we hold this repressed rage. He calls it repressed rage, but it's basically emotions are causing our pain and illnesses too, and chronic illnesses as well. And so when I first read that book, that was actually not right before I saw that specialist, the physical medicine and rehab doctor, because it was 6 weeks before I was able to get in to see him. So that's when I really started to research things. And that's when I read that book, and I had about 2 days of some reduced pain out of nowhere. Like that was the first time my brain started to open up and say, wait a minute, how could that have happened after I'm in this physical pain for so long? And I didn't do anything else but read this book. And in the book, he says people read the book and they get, completely better. So I was like, wow. So I had 2 days of greatly reduced pain, but then it all came back. So I thought, well, I tried that, checked that off my list of things to try, and I moved on. But that was always in the back of my mind, that something happened in my body that day, those 2 days. So I had that in the back of my mind. So then when I read another year later, when I read John Barnes's book, and so I was starting to get ready to understand that, instead of just poo-pooing and dismissing it as woo-woo, because that's where I was with that originally. So it took time, because then I'm so careful now because now I know this stuff and it's so obvious to me, the mind-body connection. What is it? We get embarrassed. That's an emotion. And our cheeks get flushed. That's a physical reaction. Like, we all know this is real and true, but why can't we accept it into the greater medical model? So I want to, come in and tell people this is it, but I have to be careful myself, because I wasn't there, and everybody's at a different place in their experience and their knowledge. So I wanted to share my whole story so that somebody can come along with me and maybe be that skeptic at the beginning, like I was, and then realize I'm not crazy. I'm a scientist. I believe in all this stuff, and my pain was real. I was lucky I didn't have too many doctors, or really any doctors, not believe me. They couldn't help me. But I know for sure people who just, they tell them it's all in their head. And I had some doctors maybe without saying those words, kind of were alluding to that. but yeah, so that's why it took me years really to come to where I am now with this understanding. But I also had to experience it myself physically, I think. So when I was at that intensive in Paoli, Pennsylvania, I was experiencing it. And it was happening to me that my emotions were releasing, my tension in my muscles and fascia were softening and releasing, and I was getting better. So, then that's why I was like, I've got to share my journey, just if it can help anybody else who is in that place of misery and thinking there's really no hope, because the doctors are out of ideas, that there is hope.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you so much for sharing that. And, exactly, if it comes from somebody who actually lived that and who went through the journey, and, this is where people can relate to. And I think that's where they can start trusting, because if your doctor tells you something, do they know it? Do they just kind of think that? Is that real? But you're sharing from a very real perspective. And like you said, you experience that in your body. You experience the change. You experience that powerful connection and impact of emotions on the physical. And I think vice versa as well. And I would love to just hear more about your book and how did it start? Where is your book right now? It's been published recently, right?
Right.
And,
Well, about a year ago,
yeah.
over a year ago. Yeah.
Yes.
Sure. Well, that was actually, I failed to mention part of that next 14 years, really, since 2007 till now. Writing was a big part of it. When I was in Paoli, I started to journal. I've never journaled before. I never had an interest in, thought a need to do that. But these crazy things were, happening to me in the sessions. So I started writing them down. And when I got back, I just was, especially with this memory now, I was just compulsively writing things. And I think it was really to help me understand what had happened to me, because I was processing this unknown entity that, like I said, was in my body, but I didn't have any conscious knowledge of it. So I was, every session, and I had lots and lots of sessions after Paoli, and there were a lot of crazy ones too, where it was making all these connections between my emotions and my physical body. So I was compulsively writing. Even though I was still working, actually, at that time, trying to work. I was still working part-time, and I had my kids to take care of. And I finally stopped working in 2009 because I realized I could not do all of that, manage my pain and my family. But I still was able to write. I would lie down and write, and just, again, it was a compulsion because I think my body needed it. So 12 years after I left Paoli and started writing, I finally published the book, because I just, not only did I keep writing, I didn't know if I was going to publish anything. I just, like I said, was compelled to write. And my first draft was about 5 times longer than the actual book. And, here's the width of my book, 277 pages. But I had about, 1,000 pages written initially that I cut down. So that, again, I had a lot to say. I had a lot to process. And then
Lots to say.
Yeah. And then I wanted to share my story just for people who are in pain, who may not have the hope, for people who with the sexual assault or sexual abuse, that people who aren't ready or able to speak out themselves. It was very important for me to share that as well, because that was the biggest hurdle for me psychologically to get through. Just dealing with that, the shame and the other things that I didn't even realize I had in the myofascial release therapy sessions. I'd be there and I'd find myself with my hands covering my face. Like I couldn't separate my hands from my face. And somebody later told me that that's a shame reaction. And I never thought of that or knew that. And it still can happen. I still find, it just, my hands just automatically go to my face. And so I just know that there's still some shame in there. And just these things that are natural for a survivor or whatever, that, we're going through this but we can get better. Like I couldn't talk about this part of it for a long time. And it took a long time just to, even in therapy, just to say the words, like was so difficult to just say some words. And I say to myself, they're just words, just say them. They're just words. But there was something coming from deep in me that was not ready to let go of those words and share them.
So apart from writing, how did you deal with the emotional releases or emotional baggage that was coming up?
I don't know. I guess it was most.
What would you advise people when they face? Because it's not, this can happen. For a chronic pain sufferer, they can start to tap into and access those deep, unprocessed traumas that are sometimes horrifying, and it's very hard to face it.
That's a really good point and a good question. And for me, I think I felt I was lucky in that I had therapists who were working with me. And when that stuff would come up in either myofascial therapy or with a psychologist, I felt safe in those environments. And that really is key. And then if it would happen on my own, I learned strategies I literally tell myself often, I'm safe. I just have to tell myself that, because if I feel sensations that I know are triggered from trauma, I tell myself I'm safe. Grounding things that I've learned in therapy. But when the biggest stuff came up, I was treated with such compassion and care from my myofascial therapist and from the psychologists too that I've worked with, that's how I think I was able to deal with it and process it and meeting other people, not even with the same trauma, but like you said, just other people who have had trauma and that have gone through it. And reading John Barnes' book, like when I read it, there were some weird things in there, but it all made sense by the time I had been through it, and I felt comforted in knowing that I wasn't alone, because you feel so alone sometimes when you're going through it, and you don't know if you're ever going to get through it. And amazingly, I guess I just kept working through it, knowing, I guess I always had some sense that I could get through it. Like I was going to somehow get better. I don't know where that comes from, but
deeper knowing, maybe you were on the mission already, everything seems to have a meaning and message, and it feels to me like now you're on this mission to show people that they are not alone. And I think through your book and the website and the work you do, it's almost like you're creating that community in that container, because it was what caught my attention. You mentioned you felt safe. You had therapists who were able to hold that space, but then also at the same time, you need that courage to face yourself. Right. I mean, it cannot come from the outside. But having the container be it of the therapist, but also of a community, I think that's huge. Right. So can you tell us more about, your efforts that you work in? I know you're out there in public talking about your book, and you have a website and other resources. So I would love to hear more about that. And
like you said, I've got the book, and I've done library talks, I've done some interviews, and I do have a website. It's healingfromchronicpain.com. Excuse me. And I have posted a lot on there because I have the links to the interviews, for example. But like you said, creating the community, I think, is so important. So I just wanted to get my information out there. So my website has, descriptions of myofascial pain for the people who want to know more about that, because I'm also adamant in making that more of a known condition, because so many people really are suffering from it, and it affects so many. It doesn't, and I don't really like diagnoses per se, because it doesn't capture everything, but at least people who have these symptoms know that it is something that we recognize, and that, at least for me, the mind-body work, and I think for everybody, the mind-body work is what's going to start to get rid of some of that pain and stuff. So so as far as the website, I talk about my story a little bit, and then I have stuff on the myofascial pain. I also talk about trauma and pain, and I have a bunch of resources on the links, scientific studies and books that talk about the link between trauma and pain, because this frustrated me to no end that it was just not common knowledge, either in society or in the medical field where I was dealing, where trauma is not recognized as the cause of so many things, which I truly believe it is. Not the only cause, but it has such an impact on our health and everything, on our actions and our well-being, that and there are many studies, and I have a lot, not all by any means, but a lot listed on my website, just to share that information and get that out there. I know I spoke recently to somebody, and she's a psychologist, and she said that a patient of hers brought her doctor some studies, showing it, just to help the doctors know that, this is what's going on here. So, and that's why I put the website together, to share that information in any way, get it out to more people. And I'm also I was just going to say, I'm also getting involved in some other groups with some of the sexual assault work, because that, again, I feel like is a very important area that just we need to speak up. And so there's a sexual assault advocacy network that I'm a member of now, and Incest Aware, and which is just a year-old organization, but we're gaining some ground there. So yeah, anywhere I can share either my mind-body knowledge, my personal knowledge, but sharing my story of the molestation. I just want to get those out there, and however I can.
Yeah. Well, you know, what's powerful is that it's sort of like we have to take things in our hands, patients, therapists, and just show it to the world, because there's no institutions that actually can truly assist people in that holistic, you know, healing. I mean, my hope in the future they will be growing and that things will be more accessible and more visible. But I think at this point, you know, individuals like yourself, it's just like empowering ourselves and others, you know, to know that there is hope and that there are solutions outside of the box, or outside of, you know, like the established your path of going to the doctor and getting your medication. Because like you say, there is really a lot of ignorance about how trauma and how emotional baggage, or however you want to call that, really has huge influence on how our bodies are processing information, and it has a huge influence on the pain levels. And we truly, I don't feel like scientists, or we don't really understand the nature of pain that well at this time.
And I think that in the time that I've been at this, since I hurt my neck in 2005, it's grown significantly in terms of, you know, a lot of it is just grassroots people, individuals like us, like trying to get out there, but there is a lot more now. And in fact, on my website, I do have even a table. I don't know if you want to share that or not at this point, but you know, so there's a lot more coming up. Now, if I do this, let me see if I can. Sorry, I actually forgot what I was just, okay. Does that change the screen? Yeah. Okay, so I'm just going to scroll down. I have this table of things I would recommend if they, you know, if people are not having any luck with traditional methods. There's a lot here to look at, but basically, you know, the mind-body connection, this is reading a lot of books. Some people just get better from reading books, but I was just thinking of this last column, integrated programs. These are some examples of places that are starting to understand this better and incorporate it into the medical model a little bit better. So you see that? Okay. Yeah. So that's, you know, just some ideas, and all this whole table just shows, the bold is what I've found most helpful for me. But it just shows that there's a lot of things that you can try, and there are a lot more things available at this point. But I still am saddened that it's not part of our just normal process of the, you know, go to the doctor and then just understand that, you know, ask about trauma. Of course, in my case, I would have never said that I had trauma because I didn't know it. But still, just there are psychologists, experts in trauma, who can recognize certain things that are obvious to them that is trauma based. You know, why isn't this incorporated into, you know, medical schools and others for the physical side of it, because it's so integrated. Anyway, so that's that. I just wanted to show that I've
And the why question is big. I think that we could discuss that too, but I will probably, this is another story for another interview. But yes, we should ask why. I think this is a great question. Why is this not out there yet in public, available to people? Because so many survivors and people who dealt successfully with debilitating conditions like yourself, Maria, you know, have experienced that. It's a real experience for them. It is true.
Yeah, and it's so pervasive, and it's like, you'll talk to psychologists who will say, oh yeah, I have these patients who have chronic pain, and they're all, you know, survivors of this or whatever. You know, they know that, and it just doesn't seem to be translated
Mhm.
in the right places. And
Yes, but hence, the grassroots efforts, like you call them. I mean, this is something that we need to be doing, and it will, in my view, in the future, it will change things. It may take a little while, but yes, because people, I think pain is a huge motivator in life.
yeah,
If, like you mentioned, if you're in pain, you have to find solutions unless you completely give up, which is,
right.
not an option for many people, like it wasn't for you.
Right. I mean, I had 2 kids. That's why I didn't give up, really.
Yes.
I mean, that was the bottom line, because I
Mhm.
probably would have found another reason if I didn't have the kids, but that's how I kept going, because I really, couldn't.
Absolutely. Exactly. So there is motivation. We want to live and we want to be fully alive. And it's a huge motivation and for people. So this is why my hope is in the future that, this is going to be growing, and we will be finding solutions, and we will be finding ways to communicate that further and, on to a broader scale. So many more people won't have to suffer for that many years. Like you mentioned, it took you decades to really find the, where was it all coming from? But it doesn't have to be like that, right? It can take much shorter. Yeah. So where do you see things going in the future? I know you're doing this great work already. Where would you like to see it? What is your dreamed future for healing from chronic pain?
Yeah, I guess there's a lot of things, but like I mentioned, I think getting medical schools to incorporate it more, like the literature is there, the scientific literature is
Mhm.
is there. Maybe everything's not conclusive as some people want it to be, but there's known links between illness and trauma, and not even just trauma, big T trauma or little T trauma, just stresses, everything. We know this. So why do it's like we're so afraid of our psychology that we don't. That's the way I came into it. I didn't, my body was taken care of over here, and my mind was fine. So it was separate. Keep it separate. And I think it's 200 years of mind body split that is we're trying to reverse. So in the future, I do see a movement in these last 15 years that I've been at this, 16 years, I guess now, that it's moving in the right direction. It's slowly moving. My dream would be every medical student learns about this, about trauma and about the mind-body connection, and just incorporates it into their practice. And it becomes the first line of defense instead of surgeries and invasive procedures and invasive approaches, that we first look at this. And because I'm an example, and I know so many people now who have healed without going that route. And it's all, our bodies have an innate ability to heal. And sometimes we just have to get out of our own way, and have other therapists or people or support to get there. But we have that. So let's harness that before we take more scalpels out, or without looking there first. That's, I guess, my dream. And on the other side of it, like I said, for me, in my specific case where I didn't remember my trauma, speaking out about hush subjects and things, like if I had been able to speak at the time and started processing my trauma not 32 years later, I would have been in much better shape to have not gotten to this point. So that's twofold. That's the medical field side of it, and then just the speaking out and making taboo subjects less taboo is my other soapbox, I guess.
Yeah, speaking out. I mean, I think that, yeah, and having courage to do that. It's not easy.
Oh, it's not easy, and it's not, and that's why I felt like I felt like I could. I have to. That's the way I felt. Like, how can I not speak out if I feel able to? And I had, I got to a point where I could. I just felt it's so important too.
Yeah. Well, like we ask, so what do we learn from chronic pain, right? It seems, I'm imagining that, but it seems to me like for you, it's really to learn to speak out. And it was a huge motivator for you to get out there and help so many other people.
Yeah. And yeah, speaking was never anything I enjoyed doing. I did it for my job as an environmental scientist and conferences and stuff, and I was never comfortable speaking really anyway. And now I think back to that makes sense. I was holding a secret for so long.
Yes.
Why would I speak? But now that I can and I'm able to,
Wow.
I am. So.
You are. Wow. I mean, I appreciate it so deeply. And I know my hope is that people will listen to this interview and of course that they will follow your journey and your wisdom that you're sharing now, because it's life-changing. It can be life-changing for so many.
That's for me. So.
Yes. And so what will be the message, like if we were to conclude and sort of like send out a message to people who may be struggling right now in that dark place where they've gotten diagnosis, or maybe they even haven't gotten a diagnosis, maybe they were told by the doctor that, you know, there's nothing wrong with you, or a message for their loved ones or people who really deeply care for somebody who's suffering, what would you tell them just to
for the people themselves suffering, I would say first, keep an open mind. Don't believe everything the doctors say necessarily. Like I said, my dad's a doctor. I love doctors. They're great. They serve a wonderful purpose and do great things. But there are some aspects that they may not know. So just because they have doctor in front of their name doesn't mean they know all aspects of all care. So keep an open mind and never give up. Never give up hope. And keep trying. And, for the caregivers too, just be compassionate and believe, just believe people. They don't make it up. You don't make up this. Like maybe there's one, like, well, I read something somewhere. Somebody said, well, if somebody was attacked or whatever for being held up, they're being held up to be stuff stolen from. Sorry, my words aren't coming. Nobody says, oh, well, are they making it up? When you're in some other abuse situation, for example, or you're in pain, like, why would you make it up? But there may be that 1% that does for some other reason, but that's such a small proportion. So just be compassionate and believe people and help them, and it doesn't help to question them. And, I don't know. That's what I would say from the negative. Otherwise, just be supportive and help them find resources if you can, and look out for other options and keep that mind open. And then another thing, just celebrate your successes. That's another thing that I think is so important, because when you're on this long journey, it can just be overwhelming. And sometimes you just have to remember that little thing, like, I walked for an hour today. I couldn't stand up for 15 minutes, several years ago. So, even if it's something smaller, that I went 20 minutes instead of 10 minutes, that's a success. And just keep reflecting on those and saying, I'm getting a little better. I can get better. I know that I can get better. So.
Yes. Yeah. I always advise clients, who are going through those journeys, to write down everything good that happened, every little win.
Yeah.
And also you kind of you help me understand too, that writing down and journaling and just recording everything that happens is hugely important.
And I've gone back to read. It is. And in fact, I just did this week. I read something from 2010, how I was saying, it was a rainy day, the pain was bad again. I forgot that every time it rained, my pain would just be worse. And it's not that way anymore. And I just realized that, because I went back to read what I had written, and I said, wow, see, I'm better in that respect, that my body doesn't just associate that rain condition to increasing pain, because I really believe that's what it was after a while. I think there may really be something there with the pressure, may have affected me, but it got it to be a pattern that was always there. Now it's just not there anymore. I still have pain often, but I don't have that. And writing that down was nice to look back again too.
Yeah, beautiful. So trust yourself, believe others that they are telling the truth, And just be a scientist of your own journey, record it, write it down, because it may be help, like for you, it's like I made such progress. You wouldn't probably remember that. So
right.
yeah,
It just
it's
helped to figure it out
wonderful.
too. It helped me figure it all out. So
Yeah. Beautiful. Well, I mean, I really want to thank you so much for participating today, and for sharing just a little bit about your story, and with such passion. And I could see that in your eyes, that just like wanting to share with people, and it's huge. So I really want to appreciate that and your time, and appreciate the audience. And if anybody's listening out there who has questions or is on that journey, don't feel like you're alone. And I believe you have permission to, and you are invited to contact Maria and ask her about, where can I go from here? Check out her website. We're going to put it in the notes here to the YouTube video, and read her book.
I'm also on social media too.
Yes. Okay. So we can
put
definitely
those
we can put your social media information. Yes, follow her on social media, and just learn about her story, and reach out for help, to your community. And for those who maybe went through that journey, it is so important to share it. And I know not everybody will maybe have that vocation or that calling to share it publicly, but share even with one person, and because that's how we build support. So we thank everybody. Thank you for watching today. Empower Your Health, Empower Your Life TV, and have a beautiful day.
Great. Thank you so much, Monica.
Thank you.